Good afternoon, everybody. Looks like we're ready to go. I would like to call this meeting to order and welcome everyone to the hearing. The meeting is being held electronically in accordance with Section 238 of the Municipal Act 2001. The procedures for the meeting are as per the town's procedural bylaw and the electronic meeting protocol. I see that we have quorum and that Councillor Alcock is not in attendance today. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe under the terms of the Robinson-Huron Treaty Number 61 of 1850 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. We commit to acknowledge, learn, educate, create opportunity, honor sacred places, and take actions toward real truth and reconciliation in support of our commitment to walking the path together in respect, peace, and harmony for the future generations. A motion to adopt the agenda. Sorry. We may have a clerical issue right off the start.
Okay, he said that. It was just the idea was that
Okay. Motion to adopt the agenda. It's moved by Councillor Armour and Councillor Stone. It is recommended the Planning Committee agenda dated November 10th, 2021 be hereby adopted and printed and circulated. All in favor? Thank you. Are there any members that have a disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Okay. I would like to welcome everyone to the public portion of the meeting to consider applications to amend zoning bylaw 2008-66P pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act. The procedure of the public meeting are as follows. A brief explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and any correspondence received to date will be given by staff. The applicant or the representative will be asked to provide any additional comments without repeating the information already outlined by staff. Any members of the public present will then be permitted to ask questions or provide comments respecting the applications. Committee will then have the opportunity to question the applicant, the planner, or anyone giving presentations. Once the public meeting is concluded, the input received and proposed amendments will be considered by committee and council. Any persons making representation are requested to first state their name and mailing address. Please note that presentations are limited to 10 minutes. Please be informed that appellant must provide an oral submission at the public meeting or written submission prior to the passage of the zoning bylaw. Otherwise, the local planning appeal tribunal may dismiss the appeal. If you wish to be notified of the passage of a zoning bylaw, you must file either with the recording secretary or with the clerk a written request for notification prior to the passage of the proposed zoning bylaw. Each notice of complete application and public meeting included in an explanation, purpose and effect of the proposed amendment. And notice was required to be posted at the subject lands. Notice was therefore considered to have been provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and applicable sections of the Huntsville Official Plan. We'll now deal with application number Z28-2021 HTE and B4445/2021 HTE Pacinda, 25 and 35 Rowanwood Lane and 52 Ridge Cove driveway. And I believe, Adam, you're ready to go. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to share my screen and I'll begin my presentation.
Thank you.
Is everyone able to see that all right? Excellent. As mentioned, the subject lands are located at 23 and 35 Rowanwood Lane. Currently, they're partially zoned shoreline residential 3 with exception 0296 and 0297 and conservation. The official plan designation is waterfront. The application is also proposing to sever due to consents, and I can explain them better here. What they're first proposing is a lot addition of approximately 14 meters of frontage from the lot located to the most north to the south. And as a result, once merged, they would be splitting that lot in half. So what I can explain here is this lot is giving 14 meters of frontage right here to this lot to the south. And after that occurs, they will be proposing to sever this lot in half. As a result of that and the reduced frontages, an amendment to the zoning bylaw is required to recognize those frontages. Where 120 meters is normally required, the resulting lot frontages from the proposed consent would be 94 meters at the most north, followed by 90 meters, and then 60 meters for the property that fronts onto Mary Lake. The existing site-specific conservation zone is proposing to be remaining. The subject lands also front onto the Lancelot Creek and Mud Creek, which is defined as a narrow water body. The town's official plan has policies regarding the development on narrow water bodies, specifically narrow water bodies that are less than 90 meters wide and require minimum lot frontages of 120 meters. The proposal would not be in keeping with those official plan policies, as the lot creations are less than the required 120 meters. The applicant did prepare a planning justification report and an environmental impact study to address some of those concerns, and both reports did conclude that the proposal was not in keeping with the official plan policies regarding the lot sizing on narrow water bodies. However, they did mention or argue that navigable waterways, which is one of the intents of the policy, was still going to be maintained. However, staff still remain of the opinion that the proposal does not meet development criteria contained within the town's official plan. And further, it does not address the perception of increased density and less recreational space for boating and swimming on narrow water bodies. Further issues such as visual impact, noise, lighting, and privacy were not addressed in either of those reports. The town also received comments from the district municipality of Muskoka in regards to the application. The district provided comments recommending deferral of the applications, providing that a site-specific soils investigation to determine the appropriate location for individual on-site sewage services in accordance with the enhanced protection policies of the Muskoka official plan. For committee's information, this is in result to the algae bloom that was identified on Mary Lake, I believe is on October 22nd, 2021. The full comments were available for committee's consideration in the agenda package. Further to that, the Mary Lake Association did also provide comments as well. The Mary Lake Association commented that the application be denied for the following reasons. I will read the comments aloud, although they were provided to committee. They comment that the Lancelot Creek is a narrow water body as defined in the official plan. Neither of the proposed reconfigured lots meet the minimum frontage of 120 meters on a narrow water body. And there are good reason for guidelines such as ease of navigation, and we believe those guidelines to be very relevant in this case. Further, the area of Lancelot Creek and Mary Lake is environmentally sensitive. Fish habitat exists in the creek and in that area of the lake. There are identified wetlands both at 25 and 35 Rowanwood Lane. Increased densification is simply inappropriate, and environmentally areas sensitive such as this are important. We note too that the exception conservation zone 0297 has already been granted for 35 Rowanwood Lane to allow the construction of the boathouse, despite being within the 20 meters of the type 1 fish habitat. And you'll see here a number of site photos were taken. Here's the aforementioned boathouse on site that's located at 35 Rowanwood Lane. There's also images also taken by staff of the narrow water body and the existing area, which is predominantly for committee's information. The ones taken in the woodlots is all zoned conservation. As a result of this, staff are of the opinion that the proposal does not meet the intent of the town's official plan. The proposal does not respect the narrow water body policies, and there are concerns with the development going forward. As a result, staff are recommending that planning committee deny the application for rezoning, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Adam. I would now call upon the applicant or their representative to provide any additional comments.
The applicant or their representative are reminded to use the raise hand button to indicate that they would like to address committee. And Vice Chair Fitzgerald, I do see one hand raised.
Okay, let's bring them in.
I raised my hand.
Welcome, Lanny.
Yep. Good afternoon, Chair and committee members and staff. Lanny Dennis, Wayne Simpson and Associates. I represent the owner. Appreciate the efforts and assistance of staff bringing the applications forward. I think that's a fair and accurate assessment of the proposal. I do want to take a few minutes to address, well, I guess, first of all, the purpose behind Mr. Pacinda moving forward with the applications because of the high costs of land and the housing shortage and so on and so forth. For estate planning, for long-term estate planning purposes, he wants to create an additional property. I think there was two issues that I saw with respect to the town's consideration of the application. One had to do with the character and the maintaining the natural environment. And then the second one had to do with the narrow water body policies. With respect to the district, their comments indicated that they would not be opposed to the application, but their druthers would be to have it deferred. But they also, at the same time, because this issue of the algae bloom came up at the 11th hour, also indicated that they seem to be satisfied with the placement of a holding symbol on the property as well to deal with the soils test and the soils evaluation. So hopefully that would take care of the district concerns. With respect to the character and sort of the minimizing the visual impact on the property and protecting the natural environment, I'd like to offer the following. The lands, as you probably know, are extremely well vegetated with existing mature tree cover, and particularly with the conservation zoning across the shoreline. That area will remain protected long-term. The conservation zoning also extends inland approximately 160 to 200 feet. So even if somebody wanted to build on those properties where the conservation zone is located, they would have to back at least that far. On the northerly retained, because of the type 1 fish habitat, you'd be back at least 100 feet on that one as well. Chances are, though, on the property itself, there's sort of a transition from the lower lying area across the shoreline to, as you move back towards Rowanwood Lane, it rises. And the property immediately to the north is similar terrain characteristics, and they've constructed about 400 feet from the shoreline and about 200 feet from Rowanwood Lane. I would suggest because of the terrain and the topography and construction costs for bringing a driveway in as well as hydro, that's probably the best location on the property to construct a dwelling. So between the distance from the shoreline, the tree cover, and the conservation zoning, and the limited amount of waterfront development, albeit a dock, I think that would certainly help minimize visual impact, and goes a long ways to address other impacts such as the planner indicated, noise and light pollution, and given the location and small nature of the proposed docks, shouldn't interfere with anybody's quiet enjoyment of their waterfront. From a character perspective, I looked at there's only going to be one new dwelling, a pathway. I would presume the existing zoning has a 1.5 meter wide pathway, so that would be used. And only one new dock would be permitted. The property would remain with natural tree cover, and that can be protected through the use of, as we all know, site plan control. I think what's proposed on there generally represents and reflects the character of the area, where it's recreational waterfront, if you will, in nature. I did take a look at more specifically 6 properties along Lancelot Creek. The average frontage of those properties is 205 feet, and the average acreage is 2.6 acres. So when you compare it to the new lots, including the northerly retained, that's 308 feet of frontage, about 4 acres. And the new severed lot would have about 295 feet of frontage and 3.9 acres, both well in excess of the existing lotting pattern and character of the immediate area. From an environmental perspective, an EIS was prepared and submitted in support of the applications, and FRI Corp indicated that there'd be no negative impacts as a result of the proposed new severed lot. They're also only recommending a dock. There's nothing in there about having to have a boathouse, and a small pathway down to the shoreline for the new severed property. With respect to the narrow water body policies, and I think their intent is to address navigation, density, congestion. I'd like to offer the following. And I have to say that not every policies that is in our official plan can contend with every different situation that we have in the town, specifically the district. There's one section of the OP that does offer a bit of forgiveness, section 2.1.6, where numerical values are indicated as guidelines and minor deviations, provided there's the decision is restrictive and minor in nature. It could proceed on that basis. That's just an example of a policy that would allow for a bit of flexibility. So in terms of the actual dock itself, to help or assist with navigation, it was proposed that the dock be constructed parallel to the shoreline, not perpendicular. And I think the maximum distance under the town zoning bylaw that it can project anyways is only 20 feet. Another point with respect to limited navigation on Lancelot Creek, there's the bridge on Rowanwood Road that crosses the creek is extremely low, and certainly would curtail any motorboat traffic from traveling up and down Lancelot Creek. It's navigable, but it is so for sort of passive watercraft, such as canoes, kayaks, and even that is challenging, depending on the time of year. From an ecological perspective, there was 2 dock locations on each lot. They were selected to avoid type 1 fish habitat. There's 2 existing docks located on the opposite shoreline, one downstream and one upstream of the property. And the location selected for these lots avoid those docks. And certainly the size, noted in the report was suitable. It looked like somewhere between 200 to 400 square feet for a dock. The docks would also be constructed pole or floating docks, so no crib docks to minimize the impact to the waterbed. The docks are also located on a gentle slope and on a stable bank to avoid or to minimize environmental disruption to the property. So in conclusion, I think, given that the proposed new lots would have a negligible visual and environmental impact, meets the character of the area, and I think can comfortably address the intent of the narrow water body policies in terms of navigation, congestion, impact on abutting properties, I would respectfully request committee approve the application. Thank you. And I hope I didn't go past my 10 minutes.
I don't think so. Thanks for your presentation. At this time, I would ask if there are any members of the public who would like to address committee on this application.
Members of the public are reminded to use the raise hand button to indicate that they would like to address committee. And Vice Chair Fitzgerald, I do see one hand raised.
Okay, let's bring them in.
A reminder to please ensure that you have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on, and confirm your name and mailing address before beginning your comments.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, so my name's Linda Kangas, Kangas. I reside at 230 Edgemere Road in Port Sydney. Postal code is P0B1L0. So I'm a member of the Mary Lake Association, and in fact, I sent those written comments which were read out by Adam earlier. But I just like to supplement those comments with a few additional thoughts. So as has been noted earlier in the meeting, we do have a blue-green algae outbreak on Mary Lake right now as we speak. And of course, we don't know what caused it, but most blue-green algae outbreaks in Ontario lakes are caused by an excess of phosphorus in the water. And phosphorus typically comes from storm runoff, runoff that's coming off of, let's say, paved areas like roads or patios. It also comes from phosphates in detergents that leak out of, septic leaching beds. It comes from fertilizers too, from lawns. So that's typically where these blue-green algae outbreaks originate. So the Lake Association is viewing this outbreak as a bit of a warning. The lake has natural defenses, to filter out pollutants like phosphorus. And those natural defenses are typically shoreline vegetation. That's one of the natural defenses that the lake has. But there are limits, to what the lake can absorb. And the more development in general that we have around the lake, and the more shoreline amenity areas that are created, and the more grass that is planted, the higher the risk that we end up with excess phosphorus in the water. So, and then add to that whole mix climate change, which will result in more severe storms, more severe storm runoff, which drives more phosphorus and pollutants into the lake. And to me and to the Lake Association, we don't feel this is the right time to weaken existing guidelines. We should enforce existing guidelines, and keep the development to what the guidelines would suggest. And arguably, they should be strengthened, which I think is where we're going with CPP, with some protection for shoreline vegetation. So I know the environmental assessment showed how the impacts to the environment could be minimized, but you can't argue that there aren't any impacts. And yes, the dock could be placed in such a way that it minimizes the shoreline disruption. Yes, the shoreline amenity area can be contained to minimize the removal of vegetation, but you cannot argue that it wouldn't be better to just keep it as it is, which the existing guidelines would suggest. So that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Lenny, do you have any comments there, or the applicant have any comments regarding that?
I thought I had addressed those. I think the district, as soon as they found out that there was a blue-green algae, it was identified and it was relayed to the town and the proponent of the application, and they are prepared to move forward with the proper work that needs to be done in terms of the soils testing and following the district protocol to ensure that the lot has no negative impact with respect to the blue-green algae on the lake. So they're quite prepared to do that, and quite prepared to entertain the holding symbol. FRI did indicate, as an ecologist, that there was no negative impact in terms of the development of this property on the stream and the lake. And I think that for the sake of one new lot with a septic system and a dwelling that, quite frankly, will probably be 200 to 400 feet from the shoreline, plus with the conservation zoning, plus with site plan approval, there is ample protection to retain that shoreline vegetation to soak up, if you will, any migration of phosphates heading towards the water, whether it be in the ground or the overland flow of phosphates. I think that can be well taken care of and well addressed. Just my opinion.
Thank you, Lanny. Are there any more persons from the public that are trying to comment on this?
Members of the public are reminded to use the raise hand button to indicate that they would like to address committee. And Vice Chair Fitzgerald, I do not see any hands raised.
Thank you. Okay, let's turn this over to committee. Are there any questions of committee? Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. I was wondering if we could, if there's a drawing, or if we could see the lots again and the placement or the potential placement of the proposed dwellings. It seems to me that I am in agreement with much of what the member of the public, Linda, had mentioned, but I also found it compelling that perhaps these any development would be set very far back from the lake. So I'm wondering if we have anything that we can look at. We can look at that map again, or the drawings again.
Thank you, Councillor Reed. Adam, is that something you can produce for us?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. So this is the best drawing that was provided. So this is the lot addition here. So again, this is the 14 meters of frontage being added to the lot to the south, which currently has the boathouse on it. Once enlarged, they'd be severing it into a 90-meter frontage and a 60-meter frontage, leaving behind 94 meters. Perhaps this is a better visual here. So it's 14 meters here going towards this property. Once enlarged, they're proposing to sever this into 60 meters and 90 meters. It may be beneficial, if I may, put on the existing zoning mapping I don't know if that appeared for everyone. So the conservation zone goes across the entire frontage of what would be the 60-meter lot and the 90-meter lot. And the 94-meter lot has some SR3 and conservation. I would also note that when these lots were created in 2016, because they were developing on a narrow water body, these site-specific exceptions were seen as the appropriate limitations to curb development in the area for these environmentally sensitive features. So that's why there is site-specific zoning on this. These properties were created in 2016, and these sizes and the parameters with respect to the conservation zoning was deemed to be appropriate to allow for development to happen in this configuration. I'm happy to manipulate the maps or do anything as committee sees fit.
Thank you,
But if
Adam. Councilor Reid, follow up?
I'm wondering if, Lanny, you might be able to highlight or show us what this would look like in terms of development on this map.
I don't know if I can. Yep. Oh, I can. Oh, that's handy. So the new lot, I'll try and keep this. So the new lot would be roughly like that. So this area here, that has the lion's share of the conservation zoning on it, and that's probably the deepest part of the conservation zoning, and it's about 200 feet from the shoreline. So the cottage at its closest point would be somewhere maybe in here, anywhere between 160 to 200 feet from the water.
I think I saw Adam's screen. I didn't quite catch.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I
we
didn't.
weren't able to see. I think.
Oh, sorry.
We'll try again. Are you trying to screen share? Lanny? Well, Lanny's trying to screen share. Are there any further questions or comments from committee? Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just curious, how wide is this Mud Lake Creek? Does anybody know that?
We've got your screen share, but it's I believe it's an email with a file that you need to open, a PDF. And Adam, do you have the information to address Councillor Armour's question, or we're gonna?
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you, using a few measurements on our GIS tool, it's anywhere between 28 meters wide to 31 meters wide. So it falls quite short of the 90 meter or 120 meter wide benchmark set out in our policies.
Okay, follow up, Councillor Armour?
No, that's good for now, thanks.
Okay, and Mayor Terziano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Probably need the screen sharing going on. I would like to see where the building envelope is identified in relationship to the conservation area and the water, if possible.
Mr. Chair, through you to the mayor, no building envelopes were identified by the applicant. They only provided the lot configuration, so area and frontage. However, to my knowledge, no building envelopes were ever produced.
So just further to that then, can we specify building envelopes through this process, or because people are referencing that the building would be 200 feet back from this and 200 from that, and if they're not identified, can we identify it if we were to approve this?
Thank you for that comment. Lanny, can you respond to that on behalf of your applicant?
Sure. Yeah, I pointed out the fact that, we were about 200 feet from the water with that conservation zone, which will remain natural, save and except for a 1.5 meter wide pathway through it. So I did it by, as Adam and probably the rest of the planners, we'd have mapping, and we simply apply a measurement to that mapping. So if committee was looking at producing an envelope, and quite frankly, there's area outside the conservation that is suitable for building. If you wanted to apply a 200-foot setback on the property, I don't see that as being problematic, because we'd have to be back that far anyways.
Adam, if you don't mind me asking, what's the current required setback from conservation for a building? 30 meters?
Mr. Chair, through you, I believe that the existing conservation zone already included the buffer from those features. Typically from a wetland or a cold water stream, we'd see a 30-meter setback from those features, but given the conservation zoning already on the subject lands, and again, I'll just share my screen. I have it up in feet now because that's what everyone seems to be referencing, but this is only, again, as good as the technology and overlays we have, but the existing conservation zone ranges from 177 feet to 245 feet was a measurement I got in its widest part. Should committee want to impose an additional setback from those features or just a blanket setback from the water, that's something that we could do through site plan control and the zoning, if that's what they seem appropriate. Notwithstanding, there are also identified conservation features in the middle of some of these lots, which we'll also need to be mindful of, because those areas were previously, again, in 2016, identified as environmentally significant, and they should be protected as well.
Thank you, Adam. Mayor Terziano, and then Councilor Reed.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. This question is probably for Lanny. I still have two concerns. I mean, I'm not sure I'm totally sold on approving this, or right now, I think I'm leaning towards supporting staff's recommendation not to approve, but should my mind be changed, I would want some kind of assurance that even though there's nothing more than a single dock proposed today, this application wouldn't be, or this property wouldn't be before us for a boathouse someday in the future. And the second thing that concerns me is that we're potentially creating a lot for a new short-term rental.
Yeah, if you were looking at the zoning bylaw, you could certainly put, and I've already mentioned this to Adam, that you could put a prohibition for boathouses, certainly on the newly severed lot. And there's no intention to construct a boathouse on the northerly severed lot. In fact, the ecologist recommended a dock and didn't take it any further with respect to a boathouse. So it would only be a dock, and you can put that in the zoning bylaw. I mentioned earlier that Mr. Pacinda was doing this for the purpose was the long-term estate planning for his family, and there's no intention of him building a cottage on any of these lots for the purposes of a short-term rental situation. And of course, you folks have the bylaw anyways that license all that stuff, but nonetheless, there's no intention for that to occur.
Thank you, Lanny. Councilor Reed, you still have a question?
Thank you. I guess I was hoping maybe if we could Adam put his screen back on, and then maybe have Lanny just sort of highlight again. Again, if we were to put setbacks from conservation on these lands, would that mean that the buildings could only occur in the first, say, 200 feet from the road. Because it seemed like with the conservation nodes that are inside all these properties, one might be limited to just building in the first sort of third of this property. So if we could see that, screen again from Adam, that would be great.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do that, Mr. Chair. And also through you, I know we're having a lot of discussion around building envelopes. I think it's also important to recognize and remember about the soil studies that are being required and to investigate for the siting of septic systems. And that work that's been asked to be done is really also going to inform building envelopes and setbacks as well. So there is additional work that has been requested and needs to be done, I think, before we apply any sort of standards. But here is the map up again, and I'm happy to coordinate as you see fit.
Councillor Weeb, was there anything specific you would like to?
I guess I was hoping that maybe Lanny could talk me through this a little bit. If the new lots were created, would there be intentions to build between the conservation lands, or they would be only towards the roadside?
Well, there's certainly no intentions to build on the conservation lands because we're not allowed to. The idea would be, in my opinion, I was talking about the break in the land, if you will. There's sort of goes from a high or low point at the shoreline, and it sort of works its way back, and then it transitions into higher uplands as you get closer to Rowanwood Lane. And I suspect, given where the existing cottage is constructed on the northerly lot, which is about 200 feet from Rowanwood Lane and about 400 feet back from Lancelot Creek, I suspect it's the ridge line runs on a bit of an angle, so you may not get the typical, say, 400 feet all the way along, and the 200 feet, it's going to fluctuate a little bit, but that's the idea. So you'd be building in the SR3 zone, but closer to Rowanwood Lane versus Lancelot Creek.
Right.
And
I guess
these lots are extremely deep, right? Like they're the northerly lot is probably 600 feet deep. The severed lot's probably 800 feet deep, as is the retained lot. So like they're massive. Like they're a long, it's a long ways. You start punching a driveway in and hydro in there. I'm not sure that I'd be the one trying to punch it through and then build below that crest in the hill, as well, to accommodate the terrain. So
yeah, that sort of highlights it for me. I guess if we have a 30 meter already setback from any conservation land, I guess it by the very definition of that bylaw, it would be actually probably quite difficult to try and sandwich in between, let's say, the two conservation lands, and you'd be more likely to build near the road, which I think would be something I'm a little bit more amenable to.
Thank you, Adam. Any other questions or comments from committee? I think Councillor Armour was first. Go ahead, Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if you can see the hand raised that we're using, but maybe you can't. But anyhow, I'm just wondering if there seems to be a lot of discussion over the building envelopes on this. I'm just wondering, maybe we should be deferring this and having them come back with soil samples and the building envelopes where they're planning on building these buildings, so we can actually see how far back they are and how close they are to the road compared to the lake, because I think that can change all over. Once they get in and do some soil samples, that building lot could go wherever they feel it can fit, right? So maybe that's what we need to see here.
Maybe Adam, before you comment on that, I guess my understanding is that the soil testing is required, and that will possibly determine where the building envelopes can be placed. Can we achieve that through site plan control post soil testing, or is that something we need to do
Mr. Chair, I believe what the district has requested was a holding provision should committee choose to go forward with it, to have all that work be done and addressed before it moves any further from that, and then the holding provision would be lifted. Notwithstanding that, though, I know there's been some discussion about these proposed dwellings being more street oriented. Notwithstanding, this is a private road, and really developing on private roads is only for shoreline lots. And it's pretty clear that these proposed lots don't meet our shoreline residential policies for a narrow water body. So if we apply our rural policies, which is potentially what the orientation of these building envelopes might be, we don't allow for new lot creation or development on private roads. So that's just something I'm going to leave with the committee as well.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Armour?
Yeah, I think we're just, with the building envelope, I think we're moving from one bylaw to another bylaw that could cause issues, right? So maybe we need to have all that information in front of us before we make a decision.
Thank you. Councillor Stone.
Much like Councillor Armour, there are just so many issues with this. And we're worried about the lake and the algae bloom, and district says that, we should be extending any setbacks because of this algae bloom. We shouldn't be creating any new lots. Right now, I'm thinking I'm supporting staff recommendation, but that being said, with all of the comments I've heard about prohibiting boathouses and where the building envelope and the soil studies that we're waiting on, if you really want me to consider this as something that should go ahead, then I need a whole lot more information. So I would be in favor of deferral if the applicant wants that, but right now there's too many questions. I can't go ahead with this.
Any other comments? Councillor Reid? No? Mayor Terziano, sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm going to move an amendment to defer this application, and I would ask Adam whether this is something that needs to be deferred for a month or longer in order to get one thing in particular, being the soil samples. Should we be deferring this for 2 or 3 months?
Mr. Chair, through you to the mayor, respectfully, I wouldn't know the timelines on what it would take the applicants to actually conduct that work. So I would defer to them. I imagine a month would be too quick of a turnaround. And I don't know if the seasonality coming into November has any impact on this as well. But I would defer to them on what kind of timeline they would need to complete the work that committee is looking to receive to make a more informed decision.
I guess then, Mr. Chair, I would move to defer it until the applicant's ready to come back, because as Councillor Stone points out, there's quite a few unanswered questions. And as well, with Adam raising the point that if it doesn't meet our waterfront policies, it's not going to meet our private road policies. And so I think there's a lot of questions, and if we can defer until such time as the applicant's ready to come back, that's what I would move.
Okay. I believe the clerk has heard that, and will there be a seconder for that? Councillor Stone? Okay. Councillor Stone, I guess I have a few opinions about this, and I don't feel comfortable voicing my opinions in the chair. Would you be comfortable taking over the chair for the remainder of this application?
Happily. All right, so I've effectively assumed the chair, and I will ask Councillor Fitzgerald if he'd like to speak.
Sure, thank you. I guess my question is that we're putting this on hold and asking the applicant to go back and do a bunch more work where we're not really sure whether we're going to approve it or not. So I'm wondering if the process might be to have an approval with a holding conditional upon those things. So at least there's some intention that there will be approval regarding the positive results of soil samples. And at that point in time, maybe specific building envelopes can be incorporated. So I think it's probably a large undertaking, but it would seem to be expedient for this committee to grant that in order that the applicant is aware that we're willing to work with it if the soil testing comes back and meets the district requirements, and that committee as a whole is happy with the site-specific building envelopes. I think that would be expedient for us to do that. So,
Thanks very much. Councillor Weeb was next.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I appreciate those comments. Actually, I think that really the question we have to ask ourselves is just that: if the soil comes back that it can receive septic and there's appropriate envelopes, are we okay with granting this severance? For me, I guess the thing that would put me into the category of I would be okay if the soil samples came back affirmative or positive is the depth of the lot and the distance from the water. That's for me, that's a big one. As you've heard me rail before on lots that are wide and shallow, I'm not a fan. This is the opposite, that you can set back quite a distance from the water. So I would be amenable to it, to what Councillor Fitzgerald's mentioned. If the proper approvals and proper samples come back and would allow the development of these lots. So that's where I'm at. I'd love to hear from the rest of the committee.
Thank you. Mayor Terziano.
Thanks, Councillor Stone. I certainly understand what Vice Chair Fitzgerald was saying, but honestly, the decision before us today, or the recommendation before us today, is to deny, and that is where I'm at today. So I would not be comfortable with you putting the suggestion in my mind that I will approve it if a soil sample came back in the positive. There's a whole bunch of unanswered questions. To me, this is an incomplete application for answering the questions that we've been put to them. I would not defer this and suggest to them that I'm going to approve it just because they go away and do some work. That just doesn't work for me. But I think the fact that we're looking at deferral rather than the recommendation that's on the table means that we're willing to look at further information.
Thanks for that. Any other comments from committee? Okay, so at this point, because I'm chair, I don't believe I should second the motion that's on the table for deferral. Would Councillor Armour, you had put your hand up to second that deferral, is that correct? Okay.
Sure.
So, thank you. Does staff have a motion to defer here?
we need a minute for that to happen, I think.
Okay.
I just happened to be with Julie in town hall, so she's sitting 15 feet away from me. Sorry to interrupt, Chair Stone.
No worries at all. Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Weeb while we're waiting.
Thank you, Chair Stone. So are we incorporating in the deferral a timeline, or are we just simply highlighting what sort of further homework is required?
I understand that we can't really put a timeline on it. There's too many variables.
Good afternoon, Councillor Stone. All right, I just wanted to see if we're still getting feedback.
Wow. Sounds like Wizard of Oz.
On behalf of Julie, she's preparing the motion, and she'll be with us shortly.
Thank you.
She'll share it on screen. Our Martian, Julie.
All right, it's on the screen. If all right, let me just read that for everyone's concerned. It's recommended that the matter of application Z2321 Pacinda be postponed until such time as the applicant has addressed outstanding concerns to the satisfaction of town staff, including the completion of a site-specific soil investigation in accordance with the enhanced protection policies of the Muskoka official plan to the satisfaction of the town of Huntsville and the district of Muskoka, and the identification of suitable site-specific building envelopes for the retained and severed lots. Is that what the mover wishes? And did you wish to include any prohibition of buildings at the water? And are there any other issues that we want to include? Mayor Terziano?
I think Lanny mentioned that we could include a prohibition of a future boathouse, but I'm not sure whether we can do that through resolution or not.
Director Maxwell had her hand up.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I was just going to mention that this is a deferral resolution recommending that we defer until such time as the site-specific soils investigation comes back and building envelopes can be identified. And at that time, if committee chose to move ahead and approve the applications based on the additional information that's being provided, those other specific items could be addressed at that point. This would be more to determine if you would be satisfied with the creation of the lots pending the submission of additional information. So that's what this resolution is encompassing, I believe, Adam, unless I missed anything.
All right, that seems to clear that up. And so there's nothing else needed. Is that correct? Nothing else needed on the motion to amend. Okay. So you heard the motion moved by Mayor Terziano, seconded by Councillor Armour. All in favor of the deferral? All opposed? And that's carried. And I will return the chair back to Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thanks a lot for your time this afternoon and consideration.
Thanks, Lanny. Thank you, Chair Stone, for stepping in there. All right, we will now deal with no, should I, excuse me for a second. I had a technical question for Julie, which she answered very quickly. So we'll now deal with application number Z24 2021 HTE B46 2021 HTE Near and Francis 1057 Highway 141. Adam.
Thank you,
ready?
Mr. Chair. Through you, I'm just going to share my screen. I hope that's visible to everyone now. As mentioned, the subject lands is located at 1057 Highway 141. The current zoning on the subject lands is Rural 1 and Natural Resource Zone. and it's currently designated rural in the official plan. The application is proposing to rezone the subject lands from a rural 1 zone to a rural residential zone. This is to facilitate a new lot creation. And further, staff are recommending as part of this proposal to amend the natural resource zone to a conservation zone. This is to incorporate setbacks from an on-site wetland as well as a cold water stream. Actually, I have an example of the zoning here for you. So we're proposing the hatched area be conservation and the black area be rural residential. So as mentioned, this is within the rural designation of the official plan. The official plan does allow for lot creation, and it would appear that the proposed lot does meet the minimum requirements for frontage and area. Notwithstanding that, we do have environmental protection policies, which is why staff are recommending the enhanced conservation zone. This is to include appropriate setbacks from the aforementioned wetland feature, as well as the cold water stream. The application was circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. The District of Muskoka did provide comments that were available for committee's consideration, which suggested that there may be areas for habitat on site and that the applicant should consult with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. And further, they also confirmed that there was a wetland and cold water stream. In addition to that, one neighbor did write a letter which was forwarded for committee's consideration today. They cited concern over both the cold water stream and culvert area, as we previously talked about, as well as entrances onto the property and some concerns there. With respect to that, staff are of the opinion that the increased conservation area adequately addresses the concerns of the neighbor with respect to that portion of their comments. Further to that, staff are also recommending that the subject or the applicant be subject to a 5126 agreement, and that's to address both appropriate access and entrance to the severed lot to the satisfaction of the town. Staff are of the opinion that this agreement would be put in place to address not only the concerns that the neighbor raised, but town staff had the same concerns. So this agreement would be put in place, and we would work with the applicant to ensure that the adequate entrance to the property and onto the roadway was to our standard. As a result, given the proposed conservation zoning and the conditions with the consent, staff are satisfied that the proposal meets both the provincial policy statement and our official plan policies, and are recommending that the application be approved by committee. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Adam, for that. I would now call upon the applicant or the representative to provide any additional comments.
The applicant or the representative are reminded to use the raise hand button to indicate that they would like to address committee. And I can confirm there is one hand raised.
Let's bring them in.
A reminder to please have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on before you begin speaking, and to confirm your name and mailing address. And there are actually two hands raised. I believe one is the applicant and one is their agent. Would you like both brought in at the same time? Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
If that's what they would prefer, I'm amenable to that.
Good afternoon, members of the Planning Committee. John P. Gallagher here with Chris Neer, one of the owners of the property. The other is his wife, Rebecca Francis. I think Adam has summarized the application well. Prior to our submission, we pre-consulted with staff, Huntsville Public Works, as well as Transportation Ontario, and come up with a plan that's best suited for the development of the lands. Adam had stated, we're proposing to create a lot that meets the requirements of the official plan with 104 meters frontage and 2 hectares lot area. Services will be private well and septic. When you look at the aerial photos, you'll see that the area is already cleared where development would be occurring. Originally, when we put the application in, the intent was to keep the development away from the creek, and you can see that the creek runs fairly close to the highway corridor. Staff have come back to us and asked if we would be amenable to increasing a C conservation zone, and that's leaving us with about a width of 60 meters outside of that area for development, and it pushes it further to the south end of the lot. The application, in my opinion, meets the test of the official plan. It is in the rural designation. The owners also have an active building permit for the retained lots. For the retained lot, they are proposing to build on that lot themselves. The access coming in off the road is currently servicing a number of properties there, and we thought it would be best to utilize the existing entrance rather than plowing through the creek area and the wetland area with a new driveway for the lot. So it takes efficient use of the land in that regard, while at the same time protecting the environmental features that surround the lot. It also pushes it back from the highway corridor and provides a bit of buffering adjacent that corridor. With respect to the comment, I just received that comment from the neighbor. Now, the neighbor is located across the street from the subject lands. The watercourse does not impact upon that owner. And looking back at that letter, it was identifying what happened in 2013. So sort of to jog my memory, what happened in 2013, there was a significant amount of snowfall or snow melt leading up to a number of consecutive days of higher temperatures and rain, which impacted that area. It's not part of the Muskoka River watershed. And I think Chris is going to speak to basically what he had learned from a neighbor to the west who was most by the washout of that road there. Again, there was a significant rainfall event in 2019, and there didn't be any issues with respect to that area, flooding, etc. We concur with the recommendation on the application, including the development or the implementation of a 5126 agreement to address the concerns of the public works. We also had no objection to amending the zoning to increase the NR with some additional conservation zoning to protect the creek in that regard. The retained lot is in size, so is the severed lot. I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have any as well. Chris is here and would like to address a few items on that as well. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Chris, would you like to make some comments?
Yeah, just a couple of comments to add to what John said. Thank you to staff and planning committee for consideration of this application. I've only owned the property since 2020, so I'm a relatively new owner, but I am familiar obviously with the flooding events of 2013 and some of the impacts in the watershed. Through conversations with the previous landowner and the neighbors, I understand that improvements have been made to water crossings in both locations, so my driveway as well as downstream. And as part of this severance application, no new accesses or entrances are being proposed. So I don't think, I think we're working well to mitigate any kind of potential impacts or minimizing any potential impacts or increase in flooding potential. Yeah, so not much more to add. Pretty I think we've got some good comments, and we've done our due diligence in terms of consulting with the different agencies, and we have a proposal here for a severance that would complement the existing landscape and protect the existing features there in terms of the cold water stream and the wetland. Happy to answer any questions though.
Okay, thanks, Chris. At this time, I'll ask if there's any members of the public that would like to provide comment regarding this application.
Members of the public are reminded to use the raise hand button to indicate that they would like to address committee. And I can confirm there are no hands raised.
Thank you. I will move it to committee. Are there any questions of committee? I'm seeing none. I do have a question for Adam. Do we need to address the 5126 agreement in this?
Mr. Chair, the 5126 agreement will be one of the conditions of the consent, which our director would have the delegated authority to approve should committee move forward with the zoning application. So it's been covered off, but for committee's information, we are requesting that as a condition of the consent.
Wonderful. So if there are no further questions or comments, I will read the motion. Moved by Councillor Stone and Councillor Armour, is it recommended that Planning Committee approve zoning bylaw amendment Z24 2021 HTE, changing the zoning from a rural 1 RU1 and natural resource NR zones to a rural residential RR zone and a conservation C zone. And I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, Adam, you have a busy day today. We are going to move along to application number Z25 2021 HTE, B47 2021 HTE, Chen and Parker, 1558 South Lancelot Road. Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully everyone is able to see my screen again. Through you, as mentioned, the subject lands are located at 1558 South Lancelot Road. The current zoning is Shoreline Residential 4, and its designation in our official plan is Waterfront. The applicants are proposing to rezone the subject lands from a Shoreline Residential 4 zone to a Shoreline Residential 2 zone, with an exception to create one new shoreline residential lot. The exception is to increase the shoreline buffer width from 15 meters to 20 meters. The subject property is on Groves Lake, and this too falls subject to our narrow water body policies. Both the severed and retained lot exceed the 120 meter requirements for developing on a narrow water body. And as a result, staff are satisfied that the proposed development is in keeping with development on a narrow water body. Further to that, a scoped environmental impact study was completed in support of this application, which was to address unevaluated fish habitat, which was then determined to be type 2. And further, the report recommended that an increased shoreline buffer of 20 meters be incorporated. And that is what the exception that is being added to the Shoreline Residential 2 zone is speaking of. The application was circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. 2 letters were received opposing the application, which have both been forwarded for committee's consideration. Predominantly, those comments were citing sections of the Planning Act and talking about appropriately planning for communities and character, maintaining character. Staff have reviewed both those comments received, and their opinion of the application remains unchanged. Staff are of the opinion that the proposal does meet our official plan criteria for development on a narrow water body, and further, through the recommendations of the environmental impact study that was completed, are satisfied that the zoning being proposed is appropriate and will mitigate any environmental impacts. Further, being on the waterfront designation, further development will also be subject to site plan control. As a result, staff are recommending approval of the application, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Adam. At this point, I would call upon the applicant or the representative to make any additional comments.
The applicant or the representative are reminded to use the raise hand button to indicate that they would like to address committee. And I do see one hand raised.
Let's bring them in. Thank you, Crystal.
A reminder to please have your microphone and video if possible turned on before you begin speaking, and confirm your name and mailing address.
Welcome, Lanny.
Lanny Dennis, Wayne Simpson and Associates, 3-76 King William Street, Huntsville, Ontario, P1H 1E4. Represent the owners, and I believe they are listening in today. Appreciate the efforts and assistance of staff bringing the application forward. I think it's a fair and accurate assessment of the proposal, and concur with the planning department to approve the application. I appreciate and respect the comments that I've received. I didn't realize there was a second set of comments. I only received one set, and hopefully some of my commentary will address their comments. Basically, the merits of the proposal is the proposed lots, the severed and the retained, conform to the official plan policies in terms of the amount of waterfront required for property being on a narrow water body and area for new lot creation in the waterfront. Basically, there's just one new cottage proposed in a waterfront area, stretching over 853 feet of frontage. Should be ample to spread out development on the property. An EIS was submitted. There was indicated that there'd be no negative impacts as a result of the proposal. Certainly, there's adequate and suitable area on the property to accommodate a new build for a cottage and a septic system. In fact, through the zoning bylaws indicated by Adam, the exception is an improvement to the town zoning bylaw by going from a 15-meter buffer to a 20-meter vegetated buffer along the shoreline. We're not asking for any other reductions or deficiencies in the performance standards for the shoreline residential 2 zone. The right-of-way proposed basically follows the existing driveway, except where it shoots off to the right and heads over towards where the severed lot and the building envelope is located. The lot's well vegetated with existing mature tree cover, except in the area where the existing dwelling is located, which can be expected. The ecological report identified an activity area and where shoreline structures would be proposed. And they've identified it so that it's oriented away from the narrow water body and oriented out towards the open body of water, which assists in protecting navigation in that narrow water body area. I think between the terrain, the distance, the tree cover, there should be negligible impacts overall as a result of the new lot. District planning had no concerns with the approval of the application. Would respectfully request committee approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Lanny, for your presentation. At this time, I'd like to ask if there are any members of the public who would like to comment on this application.
Members of the public are reminded to use the raise hand button to indicate that they would like to address the committee. And I do see one hand raised.
Let's bring them in.
A reminder to please ensure that you have your microphone and video if possible turned on, and confirm your name and mailing address before beginning your comment.
Hello there, can you hear me?
Hello, Mike.
Hi there. My
Just
name is Mike Paolini. I'm the owner of 1530 South Lancelot Road. So the neighboring property of the application. So I just had a quick comment. I see where this application is going and I am totally okay with that. I was wondering if the committee would be open to adding an incremental condition on this application that provides further setbacks for my property and lot lines than maybe the bylaw allows. As mentioned, and construction of a new building is going from around a 600-foot distance from my property or from my dwelling
Mike,
to
I'm just going to stop
likely
you there.
around 200.
Mike, we lost your feed for a minute there after your request for a greater setback. So if you want to start back at that point, then hopefully we get clear reception. Thank you, Mike.
Apologies, my internet is not great up here, but that being said, if there be an openness to an incremental setback than the bylaw allows for my property and lot lines, my distance from my dwelling to the closest dwelling, which is this neighboring property, is going from around 600 feet to likely closer, less than 200. So I'm essentially losing 400 feet of, I'll call it privacy. So I'm not sure if there's any openness or possibility to ensure that the building location is set back as far as possible from my lot lines and dwelling.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I think what would happen is when it comes to committee, if anyone feels they would like to address that, then they will make a motion on your behalf.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Are there any other comments from the public out there?
Members of the public are reminded to use the raise hand button to indicate that they would like to address committee. And I'm seeing no hands raised.
Thank you very much. Okay, on to committee. Committee, any questions regarding this application or comments? Mayor Terziano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess through you to Adam, I see that the potential future site of the building on the new lot is identified. Can you tell us what the setback is from the lot line closest to the neighbor that just spoke is?
Mr. Chair, through you to the mayor, they did roughly cite the building. I'm just going to share my screen again right now.
That would be great.
However, they didn't actually include a setback. What they did actually was this dashed line here, if you can all see that now, represents what the zoning bylaw currently requires for interior, exterior, and rear yard setbacks. So they're respecting those current provisions right now. Notwithstanding that, I would offer up that if the applicants chose to remove their building today and not go forward with this application, they could cite a building right up to this line as of right now, with no with no special permissions being sought by committee. Notwithstanding that, it does appear based on their sketch that the proposed siting of the future dwelling is compliant with the zoning bylaw provisions for setbacks. So that, unfortunately, that's the best I can do. I can't confirm a specific setback.
And that's okay, Adam. I appreciate that. And I guess all I'm doing is maybe sympathizing a bit with the neighbor, the creation of this new lot. They are citing the potential building site pretty much as far away from their own building as they can. So much closer to the far lot line than, and maybe there's nothing we can do about that, but that was the question asked of us. So.
Councillor Weeb.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. So Adam, back to that sketch, what is the actual distance that's the minimum that they need to, that the bylaw stipulates? And I guess I'm going to try and sort of do the math by myself if I can, see that sketch again.
Yep, absolutely. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just
please share your screen.
A little bit of a computer freeze, so I'm gonna get there. Share my screen. So hopefully you are all able to see that again. The interior side yard setback minimum requirement is 6 meters or 19.7 feet. So that's what that dashed line represents, is 6 meters from the lot line.
So if they were to put that building there, it'd be about 60 feet, would be my guess.
Potentially. Should, Mr. Chair, through you, I guess, to address committee's questions, should committee see merit in an increased setback? That's something they have the power to incorporate if they would like, and whatever they feel is appropriate. However, the applicant is demonstrating compliance with our provisions as they currently are, but I will leave that with you.
Thank you, Adam. If you want to stop screen sharing now, that would be great. Any further comments or questions of committee? Seeing none, I will call the question. Moved by Mayor Terziano and Councillor Weeb, it is recommended the Planning Committee approve zoning bylaw amendment Z25 2021 HTE. The purpose and effect of which is to rezone the subject lands from a shoreline residential 4 SR4 zone to a shoreline residential 2 zone with an exception XXXX SR2 XXX to permit the creation of one new shoreline residential lot and implement a 20-meter shoreline buffer. All in favor? No, I've called the question. Sorry, Mayor. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Laney.
Thank you. Thanks, committee. Appreciate it. Thanks for your consideration and your time.
Looks like you're off the hook, Adam. Thanks for great reports today. We will now deal with application number Z28 2021 HTE, Harris and Williamson, 7 Chafee Street. Kelsey, welcome.
Yes, thank you. I'll give Adam a bit of a break. I'll just share my screen. Is everyone able to see that? Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 7 Chafee Street. The lot is designated Central Business District and is zoned Shopping Central Commercial C5. The zoning amendment would change the zoning from Shopping Center Commercial C5, which does not include the permitted use of a dwelling unit on the second floor, to Central Business District mixed use, with an exception to limit the development on site as it exists currently, with the commercial on the bottom and residential at top. The subject lands are designated in the designated central business district. The official plan details that residential units within this designation are permitted above an at-grade commercial use in mixed-use buildings. In this instant, the residential unit is located above the at-grade commercial use, and a building permit was issued for the conversion of the second floor of the building to a residential unit on July 17th, 2000. The official plan also details that the new development within 500 meters of an operating or identified non-operating waste disposal site or other potential influence area distance would require a technical study in the form of a D4 study. As no new physical development is proposed and the application is to recognize existing uses within the building, staff are recommending approval without the requirement of a technical report. However, in order to ensure that any new development appropriately considers the potential impacts of the non-operating waste disposal site within Rendell Square, a zoning exemption is proposed that would limit the physical development on lands to what it currently exists. If any additions were proposed in the future, a D4 study would be required. Now to address the district comments, under the district official plan, the property is designated urban. District staff reviewed the application and provided comments. The comments detail that district staff recommend deferral of the application until the location of the adjacent non-municipal waste disposal site can be confirmed by MECT. And a site assessment can be completed, which determines no adverse effects. As noted above, since no physical development is proposed, town staff are recommending approval at this time. The application was circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. As mentioned just a second ago, the district comments recommend deferral. However, staff are comfortable moving ahead without a D4 study at this time. All alterations to the footprint of the building or expansion of the residential use would require an amendment to the zoning bylaw in front of you, at which time a D4 study would be needed to be submitted. Based on this information and analysis, the application would appear to conform to the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement. Therefore, staff are recommending approval. Thank you so much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kelsey. I would ask the applicant or the applicant's representative if they have any comments regarding this application.
The applicant or their representative are reminded to use the raise hand button to indicate that they would like to address committee. And I can confirm that there is one hand raised.
Let's bring that person in.
A reminder to please have your microphone and video if possible turned on before you begin speaking, and confirm your name and mailing address.
Do we still have someone attempting to join us?
We do.
There we go.
Hello. I'm technologically backward. It's Chris Ireland. I'm a lawyer in Huntsville, and I'm the lawyer for the applicants. Bonnie and Jeff Harris. I worked for them in the sale of this property, which took place a little while ago. And I promised the lawyer for the buyer that I would make an application through Mr. and Mrs. Harris, my clients, to effect this rezoning from C5 to C7. Kelsey's already outlined that the apartment was given a building permit back in 2000. It so happens at that time, in my analysis of the history, that the property was zone C5 at that time, which technically did not allow for an apartment. I believe that the whole rezoning of this property was inadvertently in error, because if you look at all of the properties up and down Chafee Street, you'll see that they're all zone C7. This one, it happens to be zone C5. So we made the application on the basis that this was not or could not be judged as a legal non-conforming use because the use started in the year 2000. So we're asking that the rezoning be done in order to bring it into line with the other properties in the area, and more importantly, that the apartment dwelling on the upper floor be formally permitted. Regarding the district comment, this particular property is some good distance away from the area which is recited as the waste disposal site. But in any event, the major point is that there's no new development taking place with respect to this property. It's just a recognition of an existing situation. So those are all my comments, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. If you could just mute your microphone, and I will ask if there are any other members of the public that would like to comment on this application.
Members of the public are reminded to use the raise hand button to indicate that they would like to address committee. And I can confirm there are no hands raised.
Thank you. I'll move questions or comments to committee. Any questions or comments of committee? Seeing none, we can remove Mr. Ireland, and I will call the motion. Moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Armour. It is recommended that Planning Committee recommend to Council that zoning bylaw amendment Z28 2021 H2E be approved. The purpose and effect of which is to change zoning from a shopping center commercial 5 C5 zone to a central business district mixed use with exception XXX C7 XXX zone to limit the size of the existing dwelling unit to 76 meters squared and limit the gross floor area of the building to that as exists on the date of passage of this bylaw. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you, Kelsey.
Thank you.
All right. Now that all comments have been received, I declare these public meetings respecting the above applications to be concluded. We will now move to the non-public portion of the meeting. If the applicant or their agent wishes to make comments regarding their application, please raise your hand after the staff presentation. All right, and we are going to Adam. There he is, back again. And I believe, Adam, that you are giving us a report on SPA 100 2021 HTE and C 2021-04.1901364 Ontario Inc. 18 Campus Trail.
That's
Go
correct.
ahead, Adam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm going to share my screen. As mentioned, the subject lands are located at 18 Campus Trail. Currently, they are zoned residential 4 holding with exception 0418 and designated residential in the official plan. As mentioned, the report today is addressing both a site plan application as well as a phased condominium description application. The holding provision noted on the subject lands for committee's information is these conditions are to be fulfilled prior to the holding being lifted, and the provisions are for adequate provisions for infrastructure, including stormwater, roads, water, and water sewer services are secured to the satisfaction of the town of Huntsville and the district municipality of Muskoka with respect to municipal services, capacity allocation, disposal of solid waste, and other related matters, a peer review of the scope environmental impact study, an updated traffic impact study, and that Campus Trail has been assumed by the town of Huntsville. And this is all in support of their application for 3 condominium buildings. These will be done in 3 individual phases, each consisting of 38 units for a total of 114 units at full build out. This item for a zone change has been in front of committee recently in April 2021, which established the zoning on the subject lands. In support of the application, a number of technical background reports were completed, including the Campus Trail impact study, a development brief, securities for phase 1 were submitted, an environmental impact study, stormwater management plan, and a number of drawings inclusive of site plans, landscape plans, elevations. The proposal is consistent with both the provincial policy statement and the town of Huntsville official plan. We had already spoken with respect to the holding provisions. Currently, right now at this time, peer reviews for both the traffic impact study and the scoped environmental impact study are being finalized. A servicing agreement with the District of Muskoka is outstanding as well. Some minor amendments to these reports may be required to address these outstanding items. However, it's not anticipated that the results of these peer reviews nor the servicing agreement that the proposal is likely to change. As such, staff are recommending that the applications be approved subject to conditions. With respect to the phased condominium, the staff report for committee's consideration outlined 7 conditions of approval that staff are recommending to the District of Muskoka for the phased condominium application. And with respect to the zone or the site plan, as mentioned, there is some current peer review work being done. It isn't anticipated that the plans are likely to change as a result of that work. And as a result, staff are recommending conditional approval, giving delegated authority to the Director of Development Services to approve the plans at such time that the previously mentioned work is complete. There is also some on-site photos that were taken recently as some works have begun. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate that. Are there any questions or any comments? Nothing. Okay. I will read the motions. Yeah. Julie has informed me that there may be an applicant that wishes to speak to this. I open that up for comments. So our deputy clerk will ask that.
The applicant or their representative are reminded to use the raise hand button to indicate that they would like to address it. And I do see one hand raised.
Well, it's a good thing we asked. Let's bring them in.
A reminder to please have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on before you begin speaking, and confirm your name and mailing address.
Welcome, Pat Dubé. I don't think we can hear you, or you haven't started talking yet.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a lot to add. I'm here to answer any questions. I didn't see any hands raised for questions either. So, but I just wanted you to know that I'm here and I support our application, and I'll answer any questions if they do come up.
Perfect. Thank you. Once again, I'll ask committee, any comments or questions? I will read the motion. We could move Mr. Dubé out. That would be great. Thank you, Crystal. Moved by Councillor Wiebe, seconded by Councillor Stone. Is recommended that Director of Development Services approve site plan amendment application SPA 100/2021 HTE, and that the agreement be prepared to the satisfaction of the town, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign any necessary documentation, conditional on all final plans and drawings being to the satisfaction of the town and all other commenting agencies. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, everyone. I have a further motion here. Moved by Councillor Wiebe, seconded by Councillor Stone. And this is not a brief one, so bear with me. It is recommended that Planning Committee recommend to the District of Muskoka that phase condominium description application C21 2021-4 be approved, conditional on the following. 1. Prior to final approval of each phase being granted, a peer review of the scoped environmental impact study prepared by Riverstone Environmental is conducted to the satisfaction of the District of Muskoka, and or confirmation is received from the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks that Endangered Species Act's requirements are addressed, and an updated traffic impact study is submitted to the satisfaction of the town of Huntsville, and any recommendation shall be implemented to the satisfaction of the town of Huntsville. 2, the owner shall convey lands in an amount equal to 5% of the lands included in the plan to the town of Huntsville for park or other recreational purposes pursuant to section 51-11 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 as amended. Alternatively, the town of Huntsville may require cash in lieu of all or a portion of the parkland dedication in accordance with section 51-13 of the Planning Act RSO 1980 as amended. 3, prior to final approval being granted, the town of Huntsville should confirm that final plan is in compliance with the zoning bylaw in effect. And 4, prior to final approval of each phase being granted, a detailed grading plan and a stormwater management and construction mitigation plan should be prepared by a professional engineer and submitted to the satisfaction of the town, and where necessary, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks in accordance with relevant environmental compliance approval requirements. 5, the storm water management and construction mitigation plan to be implemented for each phase shall ensure that all off-site impacts will be appropriately addressed regardless of future phase development. Number 6, prior to the final approval of each phase being granted, the owner shall enter into an agreement in accordance with Section 51 of the Planning Act RSO 1980 as amended with the town of Huntsville. The agreement shall be registered on the title of the lands and shall include provisions obliging the owner to satisfy all the requirements, financial and otherwise, of the town of Huntsville, including but not limited to the following: the implementation of stormwater management and construction mitigation plan under the supervision and to the satisfaction of a professional engineer. The implementation of the detailed grading plan under the supervision and to the satisfaction of a professional engineer. The implementation of the recommendations contained in the final approved environmental impact study prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solutions, Inc., and the final approved functional servicing report prepared by Greystone Project Management, Inc. And number 7, prior to final approval, each phase being granted, the owner shall ensure to the satisfaction of the town of Huntsville that the condominium description is in compliance with the requirements of the agreement with the town of Huntsville as amended, pursuant to the Planning Act RSO 1990 as amended. And finally, that the Planning Committee recommend to Council that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign any necessary documentation related to draft plan of common element condominium description C 2021-04. Okay, let me catch my breath. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate that. We have some new business, I believe, and I'm not sure who's going to address that, who's going to be discussing this with us.
I can cover both unless Director Maxwell wants to take them.
This is regarding the Ontario Land Tribunal appeal. Received an application for A38 2021 HTE Wilson, 32 Kings Crescent. So I believe it's just a verbal update.
That's correct, Chair Fitzgerald. It's just a verbal update that we have indeed received an appeal regarding a recent minor variance application from our October meeting. And it dealt with a property on the Muskoka River, 32 King Street. And I imagine that'll be a topic that we'll discuss at a future closed session of council to determine how to respond.
Thanks for that, Richard. And I believe you were going to give us an update on the community planning permit as well, or is that Director Maxwell? You're doing it, Richard. Thank you.
Now I can do that too. Thank you. Through you, Chair Fitzgerald. As this committee is aware, a virtual public open house and public meeting respecting that first draft of the proposed community planning permit bylaw did occur in October. We've received comments both verbally and in writing through that consultation process, and we continue to receive comments. We're working on the second draft to address all comments. And one major task to be completed at this time is through the preparation of a second draft is the consolidation and carrying forward of site-specific zonings from the existing zoning bylaw. That task is also underway, but must be done carefully and will take some time to complete. It should be noted that a comment response matrix will be supplied when we provide the second draft for the next round of consultation. And we're currently targeting January for the second public open house or houses and public meeting. Currently, we're reviewing the logistics around holding an in-person open house, not necessarily a public meeting, but perhaps an open house. And we're thinking it may be possible to have 2 in-person meetings and perhaps 1 virtual. So that's where we're at with the community planning permit process.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Richard. I see Richard Zieto has a question or comment.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just wondering, Richard, we were at one point shooting for the December open house. Is that totally off the books?
I would say it would be off the books. Just we don't have the second draft yet, and in order to meet notice timelines, we'd like to provide people like a 20 days minimum to review the content. So we are pushing it back to January at this time. And we're still seeking comment. We're still getting comments from some of our partner agencies too. So we would like to get those and incorporate those into the second draft.
If I might follow up, what's our anticipated final bylaw then? Date,
well, I guess the second draft would be a fully formed bylaw. But that would be something that people would be providing comment on. And I guess we hope Q1 2022, we would have a bylaw finalized. I guess it all depends on how good we do with this second draft.
I guess we're going to miss the clear cutting window for this year anyways, no matter what now.
Okay, does anyone else have anything they would like to add to that? I would like to say thanks for the work you're doing with that. I know it's a daunting task. Planning is, when you mentioned all the exceptions that you have to enter into this before we transfer over to that. And I was really impressed by the amount of public input we had. And I like the idea of the 20-day notice. Hopefully we can reach out to some more platforms to share that information about open houses and meetings, because I know some people felt that they weren't aware or were found out too late. So great work, keep it up, and I look forward to the second draft.
Great, well, thank you very much.
All right, any other questions, comments, concerns from committee? All right. I have a motion moved by Councillor Armour and seconded by Councillor Wiebe. It is recommended that we do hereby adjourn at 2:57 p.m. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your